question is doing apologetics to Mormons. So in our town, we never see, Mormons don't wear something on their head that says they're Mormon, so we only ever see the Mormon elders. And I've found it very hard to have, I would say, meaningful conversation with them. And in fact, once they kind of find out that I know more about their religion than the average person and that I'm a Christian, they kind of shut it down. And to the point where they actually, there's new ones around here now, but they would refuse to talk to me after one or two meetings.
Yep.
So how do you go about talking to the Mormon elders?
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming you've read my book on the subject.
Yeah, I'm working through it right now. Actually,
yeah. Letters to a Mormon Elder was really designed as a mechanism to not only be given to Mormons but to Christians as well. I suppose you could criticize Letters to a Mormon Elder for being out of date, only in the sense that it does assume that the Mormon to whom you're speaking is both knowledgeable and committed to the full orb of LDS thought, because I could assume that in 1989 when I wrote it.
Right.
That's 30 years ago. And there's things be a-changing in Mormonism, and you can't assume that anymore. So Letters is still very accurate as to historical LDS teaching and theology, but not so much as to the current LDS experience, where so much of that theology and teaching is being spun in essence within the modern LDS church. So reaching missionaries while they're on their mission is particularly challenging because of the fact that the church seeks to protect them from ever developing relationships that would get past the defensive mechanisms they've already put in place. So, as you may have noticed, missionaries are moved around fairly regularly. They're technically just not allowed to, unless you are showing evidence of a serious movement toward their perspective after a couple of meetings, then they're not going to. They may send another pair of missionaries to just sort of double check on stuff, but they're not going to just meet with you on an ongoing basis over and over again. They have to think that they're making progress with you, because they don't want relationships to be developed that would produce that bridge, because that bridge can go to both directions. And I've been involved in situations. It's been a number of years, unfortunately, partly because I don't get the opportunity to sit down in people's homes with missionaries almost ever anymore because of YouTube. But before YouTube, when I could be fairly anonymous, we were involved in situations where missionaries were sent home and did not finish their mission because they ran into me and they ended up with questions that people didn't want to answer and so on and so forth. So that was a wonderful thing. It's a great opportunity. There's no question about it. But you're up against a system that is specifically designed to protect these young guys from people like you. So they're just, and not only that, but you need to understand that the LDS mission is extremely, it's a time of extreme pressure upon these young men. Sometimes it's the first time away from home. I mean, I've told the story. I've told the story before, but my son and I had gone to General Conference years and years and years ago, probably more than 20 years ago, and we were flying back on a America West flight or something back then, and we just happened to book the flight coming back where a group of missionaries were heading out on. So there must have been 20, 25 missionaries on this flight. And if you can imagine this one poor kid ended up in the window seat next to me. Can you imagine that? I was heading out on my mission, and I ended up sitting next to James White on a flight out of Salt Lake City. And you could tell he had never. This guy's like from Idaho, someplace or something like that. He had never been on a plane before. He shot an entire
Wow.
roll of film out the window before we were in the air for 2 minutes. I mean, it was fun to watch on a sort of, oh, isn't that cute type thing.
Right.
But you know, these guys, they are away from home for the first time. They are buried in always being around another missionary. That's one of the reasons they do that, is so that you can't get those types of conversations going. And so most of the vast majority of the times, remember, the old number was, I don't know what the new number is. The old number 15 years ago, 20 years ago, was that 65% of Mormon missionaries go inactive for a period of 6 months after they come back from their mission. They're burned out.
Yeah.
And that's when the questions that they weren't allowed to think about on their mission come bubbling up.
Right.
And so...
I've been listening to Cultish and listening to Dan Tate's story.
Yeah.
And it sounds intense. It sounds really intense.
Yeah.
And I really, I agree with you in that the doctrine that you have in Letters to a Mormon Elder is still spot on, but it's changed in that the guys out here are younger than I am. I'm 24. And they don't.
They're just children to me now.
As soon as you get to, you know, the deeper topics, they call it that. Oh, it's deep doctrine. We don't really care about that.
Yep. Though that's not necessarily a new thing. I had that happen a lot, even when I was 24, talking to the missionaries. There are certain Mormons. I mean, that's LDS terminology. That's LDS lingo. Deep doctrine. Right. They will just pull that out. So that's not necessarily a new thing, but there's no question about the fact that there was a much higher percentage of missionaries in the 80s and 90s that would go to the wall with you, quote unquote, Bible bash, as they frequently called it, in comparison to today. I mean, there's just, things have changed a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what would your, I guess, practical advice? And if I just run into them on the street or do get a meeting with them?
Well, if you do get a meeting with them,
yeah,
you're going to have to walk a fine line, because you can't expect you're going to get a second one. That used to be something, I mean, I did. Elders Reed and Reese, we met a number of times, partly because I fed them. You could try food. Food for young guys is a good thing, might work out. But you have to walk the fine line between... you're probably only going to get one shot, but you don't want to blow them out the door in the first 5 minutes. So what, I mean, and I've said this many, many times. I'm sure that Jerry and the other guys in Cultish have pointed this out to you as well. But you have to have a goal in mind going in, because if in other words, you need to make a decision. I want to make sure these guys know what I believe about God and how it differs from what they believe about God before they leave. Okay? So everything else that's going to happen is going to be oriented in light of the commitment you've made at the beginning to do this. It's like when you get into the car, if you don't have a destination, you're just going to drive around in circles. And the same thing in any witnessing situation. So what I would do is, if you get that opportunity, now obviously if it's a sit-down opportunity in your house, then you can assume you're going to have a little bit more time. If it's a out on the street opportunity, you're not going to have a lot of time at all. And so you have to be very succinct and very clear. Here's a nice, helpful way, a suggestion of getting to the point you want to get to without being obvious that you're doing so. And that is, hey guys, you know, I've done some reading about what you all believe, but help me out here, okay? Let me tell you where I'm coming from, and then you tell me if I'm right that you have different understandings of these things, okay? And what's important about this is we're talking about, you know, this isn't necessarily quote unquote deep doctrine. This is just where you start. And I have to start with God. Because I believe God made me and made you. And so he's the first and foremost thing. And so here's what I believe about God. And then, of course, when you present what you believe about God, what you do is you emphasize all the aspects that are specifically relevant to what you want them to understand when they leave. So you emphasize his eternality, his uniqueness, the difference between man and God, that I am made by God, that I am not of the same species as God. And then you got to be careful, because if you at any one point along the way say, and I understand you guys believe something differently about that, you're opening the door for an immediate change of direction. They're going to jump in and try to move it someplace else. And so you've got to be careful to say something along the lines of, now, one thing I'd like to find out from you here in a moment is, my understanding is you don't agree about this. Maybe you could jot that down, because I want to finish this up here. You're trying to do it in such a way that you're getting it communicated, and then you're hopefully keeping the door open for a meaningful discussion thereafter. But you can't go too long, or you have to sort of watch them and read them. And when there's someone you've never met before, that's challenging. You got to let the spirit sort of help with that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you so much. If it wasn't for you and Jeff, I would have never, ever talked to a Mormon missionary. You guys have been an invaluable resource for me and through me for my church as well. So
well, great. That's extremely encouraging. I will communicate that to Jeff. He's off in Ireland right now, but when he gets back, I'll let him know about that. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, God bless. Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.